Arthur Vance lived in a house made of glass and silence. From his penthouse office, he could command the ebb and flow of global markets with a single keystroke, a modern king surveying a kingdom of data and decimal points. Yet, within the walls of his own home, a sprawling testament to minimalist architecture and immense wealth, he was powerless. The silence was his true adversary, a dense, suffocating fog that had rolled in 5 years ago and never left. It emanated from the center of the house, from the small, still form of his daughter, Lily. She was the silent vessel, a beautiful porcelain doll left on a shelf, her mind and body imprisoned by a catastrophic accident that had stolen her mother and her voice. Every resource Arthur's fortune could procure was arrayed around her, the best doctors, the most advanced therapies, a dedicated nurse, Mrs. Gable, whose quiet empathy was a constant, gentle reproach to his own frozen grief. He had built a fortress of care around Lily, but it was also a cage for himself, each sterile hallway and empty room a monument to his failure. His world was one of logic, of cause and effect, yet Lily's stillness defied every equation. One Tuesday night, the oppressive quiet was pricked by a foreign sound. It was faint, a rhythmic, muffled beat from the ground floor. It was an anomaly, a variable he could not account for, and it drew him from his sterile office. He descended the floating staircase, his leather shoes making no sound on the polished marble, a ghost in his own museum. The sound grew stronger, leading him toward the grand ballroom, a cavernous space he kept perpetually empty, a reminder of a life filled with laughter that was now just an echo. Through the sliver of an open door, he saw something that broke the spell of his static world. A man, the new janitor, was dancing. A small, almost magical event, a ripple in a stagnant pond, posing the silent question, what if the cure for a world of stillness isn't more quiet control, but a simple, illogical movement? The man was Leo, a name Arthur had only seen on a payroll spreadsheet. He was slight of build, dressed in simple grey work clothes, but he moved with a grace that belied his station. He wasn't performing, his dance was a private conversation, a story told with his feet on the gleaming floor. And he had an audience of one, a little girl, no older than 7, who sat cross-legged on a discarded dust cloth, watching her father with an expression of pure, undiluted joy. Her name was Maya, and in her dark hair she wore a simple red ribbon that bounced with every beat of the unheard music playing from a small, tinny speaker. Arthur stood in the shadows, a voyeur of this simple, profound happiness. The scene was an affront to him. The ballroom was a sacred space of mourning, its emptiness a tribute to his loss. This intrusion, this life, felt like a desecration. His first instinct was cold and sharp: fire him. Make an example. Re-establish the silence, the order. But he remained frozen, captivated by the sheer incongruity of it all. He saw the genuine smile on Leo's face, the untroubled love in his daughter's eyes. It was a currency Arthur did not possess, a wealth that made his own fortune feel like a pile of cold stones. The juxtaposition was brutal. The cavernous, opulent room, built for 100 waltzing couples, now hosted a janitor and his child in a silent ballet of their own making. Arthur, the master of this universe, felt like the poorest man in the room, his grief a heavy cloak, while this humble man danced as if he were weightless, unbound by the sorrow that anchored Arthur to the floor. The dance ended. Leo bowed to his daughter, who clapped her small hands, the sound echoing in the vastness. It was the first applause the room had heard in 5 years. Arthur's resolve hardened as he stepped from the shadows, his presence sucking the warmth from the air. The small speaker fell silent. Leo turned, his smile faltering slightly, but his eyes held no fear, only a quiet curiosity. Maya scrambled to her feet and hid behind her father's legs, peering out at the imposing figure. This room is off limits. Arthur's voice was flat, devoid of emotion, a tool he used to command boardrooms. He expected the man to stammer, to apologize, to shrink. Leo did none of these things. He simply nodded, his gaze gentle. "I'm sorry, sir. We were just finishing up." He gestured to his cleaning cart, but his eyes drifted for a moment to the corner of the room, where Lily's specialized wheelchair was sometimes kept. "My Maya," Leo said, his voice soft, "she loves the echo in here. It makes the music feel bigger." He wasn't making an excuse, he was stating a fact, a simple truth from his world. Arthur's prepared dismissal caught in his throat. He had anticipated a confrontation between employer and employee, a simple transaction of power. But Leo wasn't playing that game. He was just a father. "It's our little ritual," Leo continued, placing a hand on Maya's head. "After her mother, well, the dancing helps. It keeps the memories warm." He offered this personal detail not as a plea, but as a simple, human explanation. Arthur looked from Leo's open, honest face to the small girl clutching his trousers, and for the first time in years, the carefully constructed walls of his logic felt a tremor. He saw not an insubordinate janitor, but a reflection of himself, another man trying to navigate a world fractured by loss. Only his method wasn't silence and control, but motion and music. He said nothing. He simply turned and walked away, leaving Leo and Maya in a state of confused reprieve. The image of the dance, however, did not leave him. It followed him back up the stairs, a persistent, rhythmic ghost in the machine of his grief. The next few days, Arthur became an observer. Through the network of security cameras he'd had installed to monitor Lily's health, he watched Leo. He saw him not just as a janitor, but as a man who moved through the sterile mansion with a quiet, persistent life force. He saw him humming a soft, nameless tune while polishing the family portraits, his movements fluid and rhythmic. He saw him pause to straighten a wilting flower in a vase, a small act of care in a house that was impeccably maintained but utterly devoid of warmth. These were details he had never noticed, microcosms of humanity happening under his very roof. One afternoon, Mrs. Gable wheeled Lily into the vast glass solarium for her prescribed hour of sunlight. The girl was, as always, a silent effigy, her gaze fixed on nothing. Leo was there, cleaning the towering panes of glass. He didn't intrude, didn't speak to them. But he began to hum his tune. As he wiped the glass in wide, sweeping arcs, his body swayed, his movements transforming a mundane chore into another private, gentle dance. Arthur watched on the monitor in his office, his focus absolute. He saw the sunlight glinting off the glass, he saw the rhythmic motion of Leo's arm, he saw Lily, still and silent. And then he saw it. A flicker. In Lily's left hand, the one that rested on the arm of her wheelchair, a finger twitched. It was a tiny, insignificant spasm, a neurological misfire, nothing more. His mind, the logical, skeptical part of him, dismissed it instantly. But his heart, a long-dormant organ, seized on it. He rewound the footage, watching it again and again. There it was. A ghost of a signal. A possibility in a world that had none. The doctors had been clear, her condition was permanent. There was no path back. Yet, he had just seen a flicker of life, and it had happened in the presence of the dancing janitor. The flicker became an obsession, a single point of light in Arthur's suffocating darkness. It defied every expert opinion, every medical chart, every logical conclusion he had built his life upon. It was an anomaly, and anomalies were meant to be investigated. He felt himself standing on a precipice between the world he knew, one of empirical data and predictable outcomes, and a new, terrifying world governed by intuition and hope. The two forces waged a silent war within him. Logic told him it was a coincidence, a cruel trick of the light. Hope, a feeling so alien he could barely name it, whispered a different story. It whispered of the dance in the ballroom, of the gentle humming in the solarium, of the simple, unburdened life force of the janitor. That evening, he found Leo packing up his cart. This time, Arthur did not approach as a master of the house, but as a supplicant, though he did not know how to show it. His words came out clipped, awkward. "I have a proposition for you." He offered Leo a sum of money that made the janitor's eyes widen, more than he made in a year. The job was simple, absurd. "Every night," Arthur said, struggling to keep his voice steady, "I want you to come to the ballroom. And I want you to dance." He didn't mention Lily. He didn't explain the flicker. He couldn't bring himself to voice the fragile, insane hope he was nurturing. He just stood there, a powerful man making the most illogical request of his life. Leo stared at him, his brow furrowed in confusion. He looked past Arthur, down the long hall towards the wing where Lily's rooms were. He saw the pristine, silent environment. He saw the wealth and the emptiness. And in Arthur's eyes, for the first time, he saw not a cold employer, but a man drowning. Leo's intuition, a compass that had guided him through his own grief, told him this was not about money. "My daughter, Maya," Leo said slowly. "She would have to come with me." Arthur nodded, the motion sharp, desperate. Fine, a deal was struck, not of business, but of something far older and more profound, a silent acknowledgement of shared human suffering. The first night felt like a bizarre piece of theatre. The cavernous ballroom was lit by a single, soft spotlight aimed at the center of the floor. Lily sat in her wheelchair, placed there by a hesitant Mrs. Gable, who watched with Arthur from the deep shadows of the doorway. Lily was impassive, her gaze distant, a silent audience for a performance she could not comprehend. Leo and Maya walked into the light. Maya, holding her father's hand, looked around the vast, empty space with wide, curious eyes. Leo seemed unfazed. He knelt, whispered something to his daughter that made her giggle, and then he switched on his small, portable speaker. A simple, gentle melody filled the silence. And he began to dance. He did not perform for the billionaire in the shadows or the silent girl in the chair. He danced for his daughter, just as he had before. His movements were fluid and heartfelt, a narrative of joy and resilience. He twirled and dipped, his arms reaching out as if to embrace the music itself. He was sharing his ritual, offering up the only medicine he knew. Arthur watched, his fists clenched, his entire being a knot of skepticism and desperate hope. It felt ridiculous. Insane. He was paying a janitor to dance in front of his catatonic daughter based on a single, unverified muscle twitch. Mrs. Gable stood beside him, her expression a mixture of professional concern and cautious wonder. "Mr. Vance," she whispered, "are you sure about this?" Arthur didn't answer. He couldn't. He was pouring all of his remaining faith into this single, irrational act. The music played on. Lily remained perfectly still, a statue in the spotlight. The first night ended with no miracle, only the lingering notes of a simple song and the echo of a father's quiet, hopeful movements. The nightly ritual became the new, secret heartbeat of the mansion. Every evening at 9, the ballroom would transform from a hall of ghosts into a space of quiet intention. Weeks bled into a month. Leo never wavered. He arrived each night with Maya, set up his small speaker, and danced. He began to include Lily in their world, not with any expectation of a response, but with the simple grace of inclusion. He would narrate his dances to her. "This one is about the time a squirrel stole my sandwich in the park," he'd say with a laugh, his feet mimicking the frantic scampering of the thief. He talked to her as if she could hear and understand everything, telling her about Maya's latest drawing or a funny thing he saw on the bus. He treated her not as a patient, but as a person trapped behind a wall, and he was simply tapping on it, day after day, with the rhythm of his feet. One evening, he approached her wheelchair with something in his hand. It was a simple, bright red ribbon, identical to the one Maya always wore. With infinite gentleness, he tied it loosely around the armrest of her chair. "There," he said softly, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "So the music can find you, too. So you can dance with us." Arthur, watching from his usual spot in the shadows, felt a lump form in his throat. It was such a small gesture, so humble, yet it felt more profound than any expensive treatment he had ever funded. That night, the music seemed sweeter, Leo's dance more poignant. And as the melody swelled, something impossible happened. Lily's head, which had not moved voluntarily in 5 years, turned. It was a slow, deliberate movement, just a fraction of an inch, towards the source of the music, towards the man who was dancing. Mrs. Gable gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Arthur felt the world tilt on its axis. The ice that had encased his heart for half a decade didn't just crack, it shattered. The progress, after that first turn of the head, was agonizingly slow, but it was undeniable. It was a series of quiet breakthroughs, miracles measured in millimeters. A week later, the ghost of a smile touched Lily's lips as Maya showed her a drawing of a dancing man with a bright red ribbon. A few nights after that, as Leo hummed a familiar lullaby while he danced, a sound escaped Lily's throat, a soft, breathy hum, a fragile echo of the tune. The team of doctors Arthur brought in were mystified. They ran tests, scanned her brain, and could offer no logical explanation. They called it anomalous neural activity, a string of clinical words that failed to capture the magic unfolding in the ballroom. Arthur, for his part, had stopped looking for a scientific reason. He was witnessing something that transcended his understanding of the world. One night, after Leo had finished and Maya was asleep on a soft blanket in the corner, Arthur finally broke his silence. He walked into the center of the room and sat in a chair opposite the janitor. "Why?" Arthur asked, his voice raw. "Why does this work?" And so, in the quiet of the vast ballroom, Leo told his story. His wife, Elena, had been a dancer, vibrant and full of life. But a deep, crippling depression had consumed her after Maya was born, rendering her silent and still, a stranger in her own body. Doctors had given her diagnoses and medications, but nothing reached her. Desperate, Leo had remembered their lifeblood, music and movement. So he had danced for her. Every single day, in their tiny living room, he had danced. For a year, there was nothing. Just him, the music, and her impenetrable silence. And then, one day, a flicker. A smile. A word. The dance had been his prayer, his refusal to surrender to the stillness. He wasn't just dancing for Lily, he was sharing the only miracle he had ever known. The story landed on Arthur not as a sound, but as a physical blow. It recontextualized everything. This wasn't a trick. It wasn't a fluke. It was a testament to a power Arthur had never valued, a stubborn, illogical, human hope. His wealth, his logic, his control, they were impotent tools against the great silences of life. Leo, a man with next to nothing, possessed a strength that could move mountains, or in this case, awaken a sleeping soul. The next evening, Arthur did not watch from the shadows. As Leo began to dance, Arthur walked into the light, his steps heavy with the weight of years of unspoken grief. Leo saw him, and a flicker of understanding passed between them. He didn't stop dancing. He simply nodded, making space for him. Arthur went to his daughter's wheelchair. He looked into her eyes, which now seemed to hold a faint, distant light. He thought of his own wife, of the last time they had danced, at a charity ball in this very room, just a week before the accident. The memory, once a source of searing pain, now felt like a gentle invitation. With tears tracing paths down his stoic face, Arthur reached down and took Lily's small, limp hands in his. "I'm sorry," he whispered, a confession for all the years of silent, sterile grief. "I'm so sorry I forgot how to dance." He began to move, a clumsy, shuffling waltz, guiding the wheelchair with him. He hummed the tune of his wife's favorite song. He closed his eyes, surrendering to the memory and the music. And then he felt it. A pressure. A faint but unmistakable squeeze in his right hand. His eyes flew open. Lily was looking at him. Not through him, but at him. Her eyes were clear, present. A small, trembling smile formed on her lips, and she whispered the single word that rebuilt his world from the foundations up. "Dad." The house was no longer silent. It was filled with a new kind of sound, not the loud echoes of forgotten parties, but the gentle rhythms of a life being rediscovered. Music played softly from speakers in the solarium. The murmur of conversation, hesitant at first, grew stronger each day. Lily was not cured, not in the way the doctors defined it. She was still bound to her chair. But she was awake. Her spirit, so long dormant, had returned. She could speak in short, soft sentences. She could smile a real, breathtaking smile. She could squeeze a hand to show her love. The transformation was not just in Lily, but in the entire ecosystem of the house. Leo and Maya were no longer just the janitor and his daughter, they were friends, they were family. Arthur insisted they move into a guest wing of the mansion, an offer Leo accepted not for the luxury, but for the rightness of it. He continued to dance, but now, it was not for Lily, but with her. The final scene of this chapter of their lives was not in the grand, shadowed ballroom, but in the sun-drenched solarium. Arthur watched, not with the anxious intensity of a warden, but with the peaceful gratitude of a father. Leah was kneeling beside Lily's chair, Maya on her other side. He was holding the end of the red ribbon, showing Lily how to let it catch the breeze from an open window, making it dance in the light. Lily laughed, a sound more precious to Arthur than all the gold in his vaults. He had learned that the greatest power in the world wasn't the ability to command, but the vulnerability to connect. True wealth was not in the fortress you built to keep the world out, but in the courage to open the door and let the right people in. The stillness had been a fog of grief, but the dance, the simple, repeated act of faith, had finally, miraculously, let the sun shine through.